Right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I don't know how many people we are. Yeah, I can see 14 people join us tonight. So tonight. I'm in Europe. I don't know where everyone is. It's later in the evening here. Welcome to the second panel from the Road to Geneva events on education in environmental peace building from learning to practice. And last week we covered essential elements for a course in environmental peace building. So maybe some of you had the chance to participate in that event. Today we're looking at non-traditional teaching methods in environmental peace building. So beyond the textbook, what are the effective options for teaching environmental peace building? And we have the chance to start with an opening from Ken Konka, who is one of the fathers of environmental peace building in academia. So I will let the floor to you, Ken.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion with Todd and with our discussants. I just wanted to say a word before we begin about the Environmental Peace Building Association for people who might be less familiar with it, or NPACS as we call it for short. It's a global association, really a growing global network that brings together researchers, practitioners, and decision makers who work on issues linking the environment, conflict, and peace. And NPAC's goals are to identify promising research avenues and best policy practices, to foster knowledge exchange, to build capacity and awareness among practitioners, and to foster inclusive interactions among scholars, practitioners, decision makers, and others. I've placed a link in the web chat to the association for those of you who might want to learn more about it or perhaps even consider joining us. At the heart of NPACS is a series of organized interest groups that do much of the actual work of the organization. And today's event was put together by the Education Interest Group, the Environmental Peace Building Education Interest Group. And the event is part of a series of discussions this month that our interest group is running on education in environmental peace building from learning to practice. We had a very good start last week, and we've got 2 more events coming up on the subsequent Wednesdays, and so be sure to check that out. These dialogues are part of a larger series called the Road to Geneva. And the Road to Geneva initiative is a string of events and dialogues among our growing community that will culminate next February in the 2nd International Conference on Environmental Peace Building, which will be held in Geneva, also with some remote participation options. And I've put a link in the chat as well for the Road to Geneva activities. And so with that as context, I will turn it back over to Romaine to moderate today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Ken, for the introduction. And yeah, I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers to start with. So today we have Ratia Tekenet. She will be our student perspective. So she comes from Kenya, and she graduated this year with a master's degree in global governance, politics, and security from the School of International Service at American University. She's also a member of the Young Professional Interest Group at NPACS, so the Environmental Peace Building Association. So that can be also of interest to some of you. And she's now working as a knowledge management consultant with the United Nations Development Program Crisis Bureau. Our second speaker is Bill Timpson, who is our faculty commentator for this panel. He's from the USA, and he's a professor emeritus in the School of Education at Colorado State University. He has a degree in American history from Harvard University and a PhD in educational psychology. And you have written and co-authored 19 books, maybe more, maybe I'm wrong, you could correct me, on the topics of education, sustainability, diversity, peace, and reconciliation. And he has also extensive international work experiences in Burundi, Korea, Northern Ireland, Nicaragua, and Cuba. And our third speaker tonight is Todd Walters. He will ignite the discussion. and he's the founder and executive director at International Peace Parks Expeditions, which applies experiential learning. He's an entrepreneur and educator. He has guest lectured at numerous universities and conferences and published academic papers on environmental peace building and experiential peace building. So with these amazing speakers for this event, I will now leave it to our Ignite speaker, Todd, if you want to go on with your video and presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much, Romain. Is the video ready? Or is that something that you were counting on me to organize?
I think, wait, let me see. No, I don't think I have the link to the video.
Okay.
You're able to
Hold on one moment then. I'm sorry about this, folks. I thought this was
It's fine. We have time. No worries. I can try to search for it.
Okay. And you just want me to do a share screen? Is that how you'd like to do it?
Yeah, that would work perfectly, Todd.
Okay, great. Sorry about that delay, everyone. So, International Peace Park Expeditions is an organization that partners with universities to run accredited academic expeditions to transboundary protected areas, also called International Peace Parks. And we partner with universities to offer them for academic credit at the master's and undergraduate levels. And we have local partners in each of the countries where we operate that we work with to collaborate on program implementation. And one of the projects that students do over the course of the expedition is an individual project based off of a unique skill that they are bringing to the table, and they're trying to find a way to take what they're learning and deliver a project of value to our local partner organizations. And so one of the projects that our students have put together is from a 2014 expedition, and it's a quick 6-minute video that gives you a flavor of the field experience of how we, of what these expeditions look like. And then I'll dive into the details of how we integrate the theory of field-based experiential learning with the ability to focus on specifically teaching environmental peace building components. And so this will sort of set the stage for the content of the talk and give you a flavor of where we're at. So here we go.
One, two, three, four. Finding Don't dare call me second class. I'm proud of where I've been. Holding my head together in this two-piece tree of these lives that twist and tangle us together. Though you seem more like a dream than anyone I've met, I will believe and believe I'm not quite who we sugar yet. Wait and see if you believe in a place where all your and you is one. Not like they do now. Of this come home, just break of dawn, and we won't come home to the light. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, and we'll wait for our hair to go out again, and we'll wait for our fire to go out again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Die, let it slip, that as satellites were bound to fly. But I know that we won't get a chance because we're set to gravitate at different rates. That's okay, but before you go, I hope you know it's gonna be alright. And I'll wait for the day when we wait to say. And I'll wait for the day when we love one another and another and another and another and another. And all I want to ever do is let you let me love you, love you, and love you, and love you, and love you. Die, let it slip.
Okay, so we tried to give you a feeling of what it's like when we get out of the classroom and into the field, where we really try and make the theory that we learn come to life in reality. That's our goal when we're doing these programs. Our first program started in the Balkans, Albania, Kosovo, and Montenegro. That's the area that we just saw on the video. We've also run programs in Costa Rica and Panama and Parque Internacional La Amistad and the neighboring indigenous communities that live within the park, as well as in Waterton Glacier International Peace Park on the US-Canada border and the Transboundary Blackfoot Confederacy, Native American and First Nation tribe. We've also developed a course in South Korea around the Korean DMZ and the Hiroshima Peace Park in Japan, but we haven't had the chance to be able to implement that program yet. So all in all, we have 4 global expeditions that run in transboundary protected areas. And the way that we sort of design our course pedagogy is that we have preliminary pre-expedition lectures, readings, and group meetings to begin to lay the foundation for understanding what environmental peace building is, as well as understanding the cultures and nuances and some of the dynamics of environmental challenges and environmental peace building opportunities that occur in each of the countries where we're going. So that's our goal at the beginning. We bring in subject matter experts from the countries. We bring in guest lecturers from the State Department, the U.S. Institute for Peace, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, National Geographic, Conservation International, and their Policy Center for the Environment and Peace. And in the 3 days that we're in Washington, D.C., before we go in country, we're laying this theoretical foundation so that students understand the dynamics of what environmental peace building is and what they should be looking for when we're in the field to try and understand it and observe it better. And then we introduce the professional tool that we use. And one of the most important things that we do with field-based experiential learning is that we bridge that theory to the real world practice. And so we use the IUCN's Transboundary Conservation Assessment Tool. IUCN is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Within that large global institution, there's a group of specialists that focus on transboundary conservation across political borders. And I've been part of the team that's developed the tool to conduct assessments in those areas. And so the students actually identify a key topic area. We focus on water, we focus on forestry, and we focus on ecotourism development. And we break the student groups into different teams, and then they use this assessment tool, which is essentially a selection of curated questions, about 100 of them or so, that help the researcher in the field to think through and answer the key questions to determine whether transboundary conservation can be successful in this particular region, whether environmental peace building has the potential to take root here. And so once we introduce the tool, the students are working with and using that tool in an iterative process over the course of the 20+ field-based guest lectures that we have while we're on expedition. And so they're actually using the tool to be able to conduct interviews with the guest lecturers to get the answers that they need to be able to conduct their assessment. And they're improving their interview skills, their Q&A skills, their follow-ups, as well as being able to sort of practice the nature of triangulating sources to be able to make sure that information that we get from one guest lecturer isn't thought of as the truth until it's validated. And so we begin that process of using the tool and using it over and over and over in each of those different lectures as we get through our readings and as we make our field-based observations. And those three components really allow us to put in place an action learning cycle process that allows students to come together as a team, build their framework for cooperation, put it into practice, and then practice using it over and over again over the course of the 3 weeks on the expedition. And in that way, it's real world skill development that we're focusing on. The other skills that are built through this process of interviews and Q&A with lecturers in the field are really the ability to work with language interpretation and learning how to talk in short, compact sentences that can be easily translatable. Learning how to understand cross-cultural fluency and different cues in different cultures around communication. It really focuses on bringing together the nature of group project collaboration through this iterative research process, And then we focus on building real world skills that you need when you're in the field, such as cross-cultural fluency, field research, flexibility, adaptability, and problem solving, and then the recognition of the value of local partners and local partner collaboration. And so those are the skills that we're attempting to foster over the course of this program. And those came directly out of the early work that the Education Learning Group did before it was a part of NPACS. And this was something that Dave Jensen and Carl Brook and Mark Levy organized at Columbia University's Earth Institute about 10 or 12 years ago. And it was identifying the skills that master's students need when they come out of our programs to be able to function effectively in the field. And the several that I just mentioned were some of the core skills that came out of that workshop, and we consciously built them into our curriculum for that reason. One thing I'd like to do now, as I have sorry, folks. Yeah, so one thing I'd like to do now is I took this back as I was looking at this particular, as preparing for this particular panel. And I went back to my master's studies and my final research project, where I identified the peace building concepts that exist inherently in outdoor experiential education, but aren't consciously customized to be utilized for peace building purposes. And over the course of my substantial research paper, I identified 12 of these different characteristics. The first one is that outdoor experiential ed just naturally generates the need for cooperation. The second thing is that sometimes competition can be used in a good-natured way to build cooperation. The third thing is that outdoor experiential education naturally creates opportunities for trust and trust building to occur. The fourth thing is that being part of an outdoor experiential program requires one to overcome challenges and to be able to effectively deal with adversity. The fifth one is that it really creates a group dynamic and a bonding opportunity around addressing these shared challenges and having these shared experiences. The sixth thing is that it creates amazing opportunities for teachable moments, particularly around the concept of ripeness, when things are ready and opportunities are available to be taken advantage of. The seventh thing is that facilitator skills from a peace building and conflict resolution perspective map very directly with trip leader skills. And as a certified National Outdoor Leadership School outdoor adventure guide, as well as a facilitator, I've been able to kind of see those things in tandem at the same time. The eighth thing is that when you're out on an expedition, you're in a unique environment, and the sort of the nature of the environment creates a subculture for your group while you're in that space. And it allows for a lot of intense learning and trust building to happen, but then it requires that you're ready for the last piece, which is the reentry strategies. How do you transfer and empower participants and students to take what they've learned after they've left that unique subculture and return to their home environment, where people haven't learned these things and they may still hold different thoughts and different values. The last two pieces around from the peace building concepts are symbolism and the conscious use of metaphor. These are things that happen in outdoor experiential education all the time, and they're very valuable from a peace building perspective. Things like if you're whitewater rafting, everyone is in the same boat and we all need to row in the same direction. If you're working on rock climbing, someone is on belay and has their harness, and they have someone else at the bottom that they're trusting. And that symbolic nature of that trust is, that person putting their lives and their bodies in the hands of the person that's caring for them. There's also ceremony, ritual, and pledges that happen all the time in outdoor experiential ed, and are also things that get taken advantage of from a peace building perspective. And then the last main thing is this idea for individual transformation that can occur over these opportunities. And so those are some of the core concepts from outdoor experiential education that naturally lend themselves to peace building potential. And it's our job to focus on how do we design programs that get students to be able to access these types of learnings. And I'm going to do a second share screen now, and I'm going to show you a document that we developed. Here we go. Okay, so this is what we call the experiential peace building cycle. And this is something that we developed after about 10 years of operating in the field, when we started to recognize the overlaps between the action learning cycle from outdoor experiential education and the group performance sequence that we see in programs that are working in long-term expedition frameworks. And essentially, the experiential peace building cycle is combining the group performance sequence with the experiential learning cycle when working with conflict impacted groups. And it allows facilitators to engage participants in activities and dialogues which begin the getting to know one another process and progress into increased understanding of the other, and then build trust with each other, and then sharing information. And finally, individuals conceive of new frameworks for collaboration in order to be able to transform the conflict, overcome differences, and find mutual interest together to build peace. So that's the idea of this whole cycle. And it's combining these two pieces. The group performance sequence, which is this. Each cycle should move the group up a level of the performance sequence. So when you're starting out on a program, the first few days, everyone's getting to know each other. We're forming our identities. And then we're beginning to increase our understanding, not just of each other and our group dynamics, but about the place that we're learning and the things that we're learning about. And then we start to build trust, and we have our challenges, but we overcome those challenges because we've built some understanding and have some resiliency already. And after we do that, we begin this norming process of really starting to create the norms of how our group is going to work, and feeling comfortable sharing information that maybe we didn't feel comfortable before we had developed that trust. And then finally, we reach the top stage of being a high-performing group that can actively solve problems collaboratively. So that's the group performance sequence. On the left is the experiential learning cycle, right? So this is the ways that the 4 stages of experiential learning allow the groups of individuals to share an experience doing something together, and then consider what they did, to learn from what they did, and to create new ways of doing that better, and to share and to try and apply that new strategy. And so this is the action learning cycle. First, they do something, engage in an activity, and then they reflect, think about, discuss, analyze, and then they develop new ideas of how to form these new frameworks, concepts, strategies, and then they apply the new strategy in action. And so we saw these 2 cycles interacting with each other. And at the early stages, when you're forming, you're starting the process and you're going through the experiential peace building cycle. But then you're starting and you're building, and you're working from increased understanding. And then you're working from developed trust, and then shared information, and then solving problems. And so in this way, the integration of the fields of experiential learning and the fields of peace building can iteratively reinforce each other through this experiential peace building cycle. I think I have 4 minutes left. Is that right? Yes? Okay, cool. So the last things that I'd like to use to be able to wrap up on is the 3 key ways that I see that field-based experiential learning can really contribute to environmental peace building, and how it can be an effective platform for teaching environmental peace building. Is the first thing is the concept of proprioception, right? So the ability, essentially muscle memory, right? The ability to go through an action and activity and to have more than just an intellectual understanding of it. You have the feeling of your entire body, as well as the experiences of your senses that are also contributing to the way that your brain remembers that experience. And so the idea of proprioception and muscle memory is that when we're teaching environmental peace building, we're identifying a way to take that theory, bring it to the field, and allow students to interact with it, so that we're using the tool and we're using it over and over and over. So we're getting better at it. We're learning how to make observations with our own eyes and our own senses. And we're improving as we go because we're moving to different locations and we're having new things to observe and try and understand. And then by doing that, it creates a really powerful memory in your brain, because it's no longer just tagged with the intellectual understanding of the theory, but it has additional tags that allow your body to be able to recall that information more readily. And so that's one thing that makes experiential learning an extremely valuable teaching tool, is harnessing this power of proprioception. The second thing is understanding this idea of the action learning cycle and how it integrates with peace building. And in doing so, you can recognize ways to identify the place that the participants and the group are at in their sequence on that diagram, which allows you to be able to more effectively understand what is the information that they need to be taught at that particular stage in order to be able to level up to that next step. And so it's a very sequential and iterative pedagogy where we're building on foundation, and then we're using experiences, and then we're practicing using tools and skill building to be able to advance up that level of group performance within the understanding of the dynamics of the conflict and the environmental peace building programs and projects that are occurring. And then the last thing that I just want to share with the group that we've found to be an extremely important part of teaching environmental peace building in the field is that there needs to be some kind of reentry training, some kind of reentry project, something that takes the experience from the location where it was, where we had that subculture of the small group, where we had that unique environment that we were all participating in, and we're not in that anymore. And so how do we maintain the things that we learned while we were in that experience with those people, learning this, you know, this intense learning process over these 3 weeks together? And I think that what we've done is that we've tried to do 2 different things. We've tried to ask students to come up with a communication strategy for when they return home, so that they are sharing the experiences with their family, their community, and their fellow students. And so we're asking students to identify ways to do that through public presentations, through info sessions, through informal conversations, through, you know, shared group opportunities. So that's one. And then the second thing is, I mentioned at the beginning, this idea of partnering with our local partners and doing projects that are valuable to them. And so those are things that happen after we come back from the field, and we're working with those local partners in a process to produce, edit, and finalize these projects. And these are ways that students take something that they're interested in and they want to learn and make it valuable to them. And so now, we've done things like endemic flora and fauna, guidebooks. We've had things like cookbooks of traditional recipes of slow foods that are no longer, being produced except in certain areas. We looked at satellite imagery of illegal logging in national parks and around national parks. We looked at climate change and the dam booms that are happening for hydroelectric development. And so all of these are ways that the students would take something that they're interested in learning and then sort of contributing it back to the local partner organizations after the course has contributed. And then the last thing that we do around that is we have an alumni group where we keep in touch with all of the alums that have participated in our programs. We update them on the upcoming programs, and we share with them news from our local partners so that they can maintain those ties and bonds and relationships. And many of them have gone to return to those places that we visited on expedition after they've graduated and bring others to those locations as well. And so that's how International Peace Park Expeditions uses field-based experiential learning to teach about environmental peace building on field-based expeditions.
Thank you very much, Todd. It was really interesting, and I think you really gave a good overview of what experiential education means with different forms, but also like providing this framework and bringing it with the example of the peace building parks in the Balkans, so bridging together your theoretical approach and what happens on the ground. So thank you very much. I think it's a great introduction for our discussion now. And I'd like to invite Ratia and Timpson to join us for the discussion. I'd like to start by asking you, what do you think are the most successful options for teaching environmental peace building?
All
right. So I'm going to ask that question again. What do you think are the most successful options for teaching environmental peace building? Because we've talked a lot about outdoor experiential learning. I'm wondering if there were other things you might have experienced, Ratia, as a student, and maybe Bill, and the different work that you've done internationally, and if you can talk about those experiences.
Who would you like to go first?
Bill, go ahead, and Ratia, if you want to go on after Bill.
Okay, let me post. Trying to put something in the chat. Doesn't want to go. Let me try it this way. Doesn't want to go in there. Okay. Nice work, Todd. It's nice to see you out in the field doing those kinds of things. Experiential learning is powerful. I think my message to all of you is that there's much to know about the teaching and learning process, about peace building, about sustainability. And think about this, the US, I'll use that as an example. Every nation on earth, I think, invests in military science and military studies. Very, very, very few put any energy or resources into peace studies. So think about that. There's enormous energy, money, resources, talent going into on the military side, but very little on the peace building side, sustainability side. Climate change is coming down hard on the whole planet. We have enormous amount of tragedy, conflict, trauma from ongoing military interactions and violence. We have to turn this corner, and there's a lot to know. We need to challenge, from my perspective, our schools and universities to do much more about what's necessary to teach about sustainability, to teach about peace. And that's where my career has gone. In the last 20 years, I've spent considerable time in Northern Ireland looking at their peace process and direct links with sustainability. And then in South Korea at the Graduate Institute of Peace Studies near the DMZ. And for the last 10 years in Burundi, East Africa, University of Gozi, where they're emerging from the legacy of colonization, deep poverty, civil war, and now trying to rebuild themselves. And so between Fulbright Awards and global grants from Rotary, we've been able to put together about 10 years of work to build something. So through all that, I'll just give you a couple of examples. This is my latest 2019 Learning Life's Lessons, and it's a reference to history that undergirds, for me, hopefulness. I can get pretty disheartened when I start looking at violence and tragedy and environmental pressures. And so my history background, undergraduate, pushed me to look through history. Where are there instances where people have faced serious challenges and moved through them in a positive, constructive kind of way? And I've linked that to earlier work on peace building that I've written, teaching and learning peace. When the US was starting this horrible, traumatic invasion of Iraq, it just drove me crazy and I had to do something. So I started on that. A compilation of ideas for teaching peace building in this book on tips for teaching peace and reconciliation. Sustainability. There's a lot to know about how we teach that and how we change paradigms. We're in my thinking, very destructive paradigm in the US and the West in particular around consumption and materialism. And the planet cannot support that level of use and misuse. So how do we turn that corner? How do we change all that? A nod to Todd's work, we have a book on experiential learning. And then I'll talk about case studies, and I think what he's doing is a good example of that. So let me give you an example. In October, this is built around a calendar, this book. And in October, I have a tip. The title is Rethink Stereotypes. And it's about the statues that are being taken down in the US as we rethink white supremacy and the history of the South and racism and all that. Rethinking who our heroes are and moving forward that way. And I make reference to, I spent some amount of time in South Africa, and I'm really taken by their Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was willing to look at the horrors of apartheid and face them publicly with admission of error, with the consideration of reparations, with a look towards reconciliation of how do you overcome something that horrific and that long. And nothing's perfect, nothing's ideal, but at least they had the courage to face all that. And in the US anyway, I don't see us doing much of that. Little hits and misses. And right now there's a giant pushback against critical race theory in the schools. And so we're resisting a lot of what we know makes for a difference. So a couple of sources just to tap into what Todd was saying. Bill Perry remains to me an iconic fellow in terms of cognitive development. And in his model, at the lowest level, we have dichotomous thinking, yes, no, right, wrong. The kind of learning that goes on in most schools and most colleges and universities. As you grow in your intellectual ability, Perry argues, you become more open to possibilities, other perspectives, not that you agree with them, but you're open to them. At the highest level, you're able to evaluate and even rethink your own perspectives, right? And that's not being wishy-washy. That's being open to new ideas, new possibilities, new data. So I find I carry that with me, whether it's experiential work that Todd's doing, challenging students to hear other perspectives and then move on. The other seminal work from me is Elise Boulding's Cultures of Peace. You have to read that one because she says that we focus too much in our media, in our schools on tragedies and conflicts and violence. History is too often about warfare. And she challenges all of us to go to places where peace has been created and is being sustained. So that got me to Northern Ireland. After 400 years of conflict, they signed a peace accord and it's holding. Fabulous lessons there. Let me give you one example. 3 business people got together. They had funds from the European Union and they wanted to take wood that was in the waste stream heading for the landfill and do something with it. So conservation. So that was goal number 1. Number 2, they wanted to introduce young people in Belfast, that's where this is, to marketable skills that could offer employment. A lot of unemployment in Belfast. A lot of young men in particular get recruited by the paramilitaries. And suddenly you have this 400 years of violence going on and on and on. So they're trying to give young people marketable skills in a new direction, more sustainable, using what was waste and producing new products. And this is now a business. They got 5 years of seed money, but it's now a business. And here's the sweet thing, because a lot of the peace movement built off of grassroots efforts, mostly women at first, and then the boys came along eventually. So the third piece of this fabulous experiment called TREE, Timber Recycling Eco Enterprises in Belfast. The third, they put a Protestant kid next to a Catholic kid, learning these skills, right? Now, these are people who are taught directly, indirectly from the culture, from parents, from the community to hate each other. 400 years of killing. And they put them shoulder to shoulder, working on new products on this equipment. And the research is very clear. You put people, even enemies, together, shoulder to shoulder on new projects, and you start breaking down, deconstructing their hatred for each other, the prejudices that they had, and suddenly they start working as a team. Any sports team that works, there's chemistry, and people learn to support each other and break down whatever they had learned about the other that no longer works anymore. So that's in this one little business, small little business in the landscape. No one's writing about it. No one hears about it. There's not a lot of money behind it, but it's a startup. And so that fuels a lot of my work of grassroots participation in creative new endeavors, not coming just from the top, from the people with the degrees or the money or the power, but also from the grassroots level, what will work. So that's a good example in Northern Ireland. South Korea, interesting. I taught a class on peacemaking. I had several members of the South Korean military in my class. And I was shocked because this is at a time, it's in the news today. The North Koreans are firing missiles into the ocean and American headlines are ablaze. The guys in the military in my class, they wanted to talk about Germany. Think about that. They wanted to talk about Germany. How was it that the Germans were able to reunify? Right? This is while the missiles are flying. They want to know what was it that allowed Germany to reunite They have a 10,000-year-old culture. People I was working with wanted to get back with their brethren in the north. They don't want to be facing off in another war. So that to me was powerful. And again, the connection of history to peace and reconciliation. And finally, in Burundi, East Africa, we've been there 10 years working at the University of Gozi. So while the country was emblazed with a civil war, right? The Germans came in, the Belgians, they put the minority in power, the Tutsi. Surprise, surprise, when they left and independence was declared, there was a civil war. It had all been laid out, and the Germans brought in their racist views of one group is superior to another. They had to undo all that. But at least Bolding taught me, go to places where pieces happen. In Gozi, Ngozi, Burundi, small community, they remained peaceful throughout the entire civil war. So they remained a focal point. What was it in the water? What was it in the people? What was it in the churches, in the community that allowed them to not to turn against each other? So one quick example, a colonel in the military, a Tutsi, member of the minority, was ordered to go out and kill Hutus who had an education, mostly males. He refused. And so he risked, execution, he risked jailing, he risked all that. But in that part of Burundi, they were hanging together. They refused to turn on each other. So it's been fascinating to be there and witness it and try to understand all that. So we have a peace education club. We're trying to, with the help of Rotary. So Fulbright got me started on these things, and then Rotary International has global grants, and they're building on top of the success in Burundi. And we're using principles of peace education to teach literacy, because they were colonized by the Germans and Belgians, they speak French in schools. The other neighboring nations, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, all speak English because they were colonized by the British. So there's a lot of interest in learning English, and we've tied it to peace studies. So they're not just learning Dick and Jane and phonetics, they're learning concepts of peace as they learn English. And we're hoping that can become a model for other places. So that's pretty cool. So that's it. So there's a lot to know. I'll end with, we've got a couple of books on case studies of connecting controversial case studies, teaching on sustainability, conflict, and diversity. So my argument is all three of those hot areas are important and relevant. You'll see, case studies are used in many professional schools, business, law, medicine. It's a different way of teaching and learning. And some faculty are terrified of case study, problem-based learning, because they're not lecturing, they're not in control, they're not pointing to what the truth is. That takes a different kind of mentality to navigate and to open students up to that kind of experience like Todd is doing. So it's not easy. It's not for everybody. You can learn to do it. You can get better. We have a couple of books on performing arts and related to teaching. Role playing is very common when you actually practice what someone else is thinking as a way to develop empathy. Not that you have to agree, but at least you have to understand that other perspective. So it's a big field. There's a lot to learn, and we just have to get after it. That's it. That's enough. Question. I'll take questions later.
Thank you for sharing all these different experiences. I think there's a lot to learn from different contexts of teaching, but also learning. And so I'd like to let Ratia as well answer the questions, and I'm going to rephrase that more from your perspective as a student. What do you find the most valuable in non-traditional teaching?
Thank you, Romain, and the whole team that organized this session. Happy to be here. And for me, being a student and learning about environmental peace building, I think the most critical part is learning skills that I can be able to use later in my work. and that I can apply basically in my career moving forward. And I find that Skills Institute, whereby you have sort of like workshops that it's more experiential, where you work with a team of students and a lead instructor, and you're able to go through case studies, examine the case study, and then have your own input. I find that very useful in terms of learning, in terms of just retaining the knowledge from what we have learned, and also challenging my own biases that I had coming into the workshop setting, classroom setting, or whatnot. In this case, also learning from practitioners who have been in the field and have conducted this field cases, we are able to utilize, more able to apply just not the theory, but also putting it into practice from the student side. So you're sort of simulating an experience whereby you can be able to translate the skills that you're learning into that particular concept. And I think for me, being a student, I find that more helpful. I am able to understand the perspective more. I am able to understand complex issues in a better way, and I am able to apply theory in this sense. And it's also important for me as a student to have that in-depth understanding. So not just the brushing through like the concept that, okay, this is what peace building and this is what conflict is in the setting, but being able to put myself in the shoes of, if it's the communities who are affected in a particular region, really understanding that local context and the local perspective. I think that's important. So what for me stands out is the Skills Institute sort of learning that in the end supplement the field learning experience, because you're working towards reaching that goal, and also being able to simulate that experience is very useful for us as students.
Can I ask as well, how do you find it then? How does it help you to find a job, and how easy is it to sell it to an organization or company? Because you're not showing a degree, you're showing skills. So that you learn from a different non-traditional teaching. So how do you find it?
Right. Well, I can use my current experience to relate to that, because while at AU, I took a conflict sensitive programming skills institute with Calbrook, and I think this has been one of the best decisions I ever made. Because now with my work at UNDP with the Crisis Bureau, where we're working with fragile states, we are working towards implementing projects in fragile states. I think the one critical thing that I'm finding is knowing and being able to apply conflict-sensitive programming in the work of the organization, and bringing in those local perspectives when we're designing projects for them, so that we're not designing projects for the UN that at the end of the day, they're not going to be meeting anyone's goal, but they're working to support the goal of the people and what the people on the ground really need. So understanding those local perspectives is really critical. And when we're talking about environmental peace building and we're talking about bottom-up approaches, I think this is one direction that I think is important, and for us to learn from the get-go is how do we bring up this bottom-up approaches and elevate them to a level that even policy at the global level recognizes them and understands and appreciates them.
Thank you very much. It's good to learn from that perspective as well. And Todd, as a practitioner, what would be your main advice to teachers in the fields who want to use experiential learning as a tool?
I think the main thing is that you have to understand what the action learning cycle is and how experiential learning in the field is different from the teaching that teacher does traditionally. So if you are a classroom-based teacher that relies primarily on lecture, experiential learning is going to be something that is totally different than what you're doing. It's going to be something that is kind of embedded in the location where it takes place. And so, you know, we do the water resource management lecture from a dock in the middle of the lake. We do the border security lecture at the border. We do the, you know, illegal forestry conversation, you know, in a clearing space where a clear cut has happened, right? And so embedding the learning in the location where the topic is occurring is one component. And then the next thing is, instead of sort of lecture-based learning, it's more of a, we will bring the director of the national park that is dealing with the illegal logging challenges to talk to you. You'll hear his perspective, and then you'll get to use your field-based IUCN Transboundary Conservation Assessment tool to interview and gather data from, you know, the director. And then tomorrow we're going to talk with you know, a local shepherd that has an ecotourism hut that used to do illegal logging, and he'll explain to you why he did it and why it was important for him and his family and the methods that they used, and then why he's changing and choosing a different path now. And so you know, we really try and sort of take that idea that we learn from a theoretical foundation and understanding before we get to the field, and then have the people that are living that work be the guest lecturers that come out to lecture us in the location where that topic of conversation is happening. And by combining those different types of methodologies, it allows for, you know, the learning that occurs in that place to really have a strong experiential component and to be something that you know, is more easily remembered in your brain. And so I think that those are kind of the ways that experiential learning can be sort of dramatically different from lecture-based classroom teaching.
Thank you. Would any one of you like to comment on what has been discussed so far? Otherwise, we'll move on to a little activity. All right. So we'd like to invite you to go into breakout rooms. So I think Sheila will take care of that, or Bucket. And hello.
Yeah, I'm just going to split everyone into breakout rooms now.
All right. Well, before doing that, I just want to explain what's going to happen. So we would like you to discuss in small groups a few questions, and then we'll come back together and discuss it. So if when you get into groups, you can decide on someone to report what you've been discussing on, and I will send you the questions in the chat right now, and we'll present it to you. So the first question is, from your perspective, so you might be a student, professor, practitioner, or doing something else, what alternative methods for teaching environmental peace building would you like to implement or to participate in if you are a student? The second question is, what are the main barriers for using these alternative teaching methods? And the third question is more about sharing any success or failure stories in using or participating in alternative teaching methods in environmental peace building.
All right, I will send the invitations for the breakout rooms now, if that's all right.
Yes.
In the middle of conversation.
That happens often. I'm sorry for that.
This is the experience that's going to be the closest to the beam me up Scotty from Star Trek. Somebody else takes one room and puts you in another. It's
There was always
right.
one character on Star Trek who you knew was not going to survive until the end of the show. You know, crewman number 4 or something like that, who would be beaming down with all the stars and then somehow wasn't coming back. So I always feel when I'm going to breakout rooms, I feel like crewman number 4.
As long as you don't wear a red shirt, Ken, I think you'll be all right.
Okay, good to know.
All right, well, welcome back to everyone. We have 10 minutes left for this panel, so we'll try to compact everything. If any of the group wants to report back on what you've been discussing, that'd be really interesting to share for everyone. I'm sure we can learn from that. If you can do it in 1 minute, that would be perfect. So then we have time to hear everyone if all of the group wants to share.
Nancy, why don't you report for our group?
Okay. We addressed the theme that of how to make environmental situations real and conflict real, and also the challenges. People mentioned how they may be an environment that is rich with opportunities, but the difficulties of going out and actually finding partners it can be the greatest challenge. I'm struggling for words here, but Alejandra mentioned the difficulty of breaking down walls, like where we may be in the midst of opportunities, but how do you bring things into the classroom? And so she mentioned having great lecturers, also drama and theater. Nicola, who's working in Mexico, saying how there's rich opportunity, but again, how to find partners. And Bill has traveled to so many different areas where he was actually immersed. And so I think this has been a wonderful discussion, because Todd has shown us how one modality for going out and reaching and helping students be immersed in the problems and help them address them.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anyone else want to share what has been said in their group?
Since we're running out of time, I'll jump in. We didn't have any real students in ours. We were rather an advanced, in age. I perhaps cumulative about 130. From your perspective, what alternative methods? We struggle with the idea that you had to pitch a method specific to a kind of the skill that you want. So, Todd presented Peacebuilding, the out in the field and a variety of things there, but Bill also talked about some really interesting things that don't necessarily mean that you need to go anywhere necessarily. So, somehow I envision a kind of like some kind of a pedagogical chart, that what's the impact, what's the value, how do you do this? The barriers are obvious. The barriers are the wrong people. The most vulnerable people or most seriously impacted are rarely ever in the room. So how do you reach them? And so we're back to last week's question about, who is this for and what is the audience? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do everything. You can deliberately pitch your training at grassroots level if you want, or you can pitch it higher if you want. We didn't get to any success or failure stories, so I'll leave that to others to weigh in on.
Thank you, Larry. Anyone else?
Maybe I could just say a word about our group very quickly. So we very quickly lost the script and just talked, but I think there were some really interesting ideas here that are relevant to the script. So one point that came up was sort of the culture of the academic setting or the learning setting for students, and how that can vary from country to country and from discipline to discipline. And so the degree of openness to this inherently interdisciplinary work is going to be very different for students in, say, architecture than students in, say, engineering, and the natural tendency toward critical engagement and critical thinking is encouraged in some educational systems and discouraged in others, and so on. And so wrestling with those felt like a barrier to doing this work. A second theme that came up was the just to, to think systematically about the blending of the academic and the practical. And while, we're talking about taking students who have been too immersed in an academic setting in this particular context that we've been discussing and giving them a kind of a grounded, experiential and practice-based experience, rub elbows with practitioners. The practitioners are just as much in need, I think, of some of the things that the academy can bring. And so what we're really trying to move, the idea of maybe sort of like a focus group that really blended would maybe be sort of a next stage of education that we should really be striving for. And then the third thing, just as a practical matter, and I know this is something Todd has thought a lot about, I wish we had time to hear from him on it, is what are the benefits for local communities of these kinds of activities? From the very, prosaic, are they compensated? Do local community members get to participate? Is there value in the academic work that the students might do and then send on and so on? This is always a real challenge. And, there's a lot of peace building dynamics among the students and they're learning, but we want to make sure that it's, fully engaged and done so in kind of an equitable sort of manner. And those things are very, very difficult. There's privilege here and we have to acknowledge it and then transform that. And so maybe a future workshop could focus on that question, because I think there's a lot of people here that have some experience with that and have some good ideas around that, that we could all share. So.
Thank you, Ken. We had a last group, if someone wants to jump in. 1 minute left for that.
I think we were talking about change to a lot of virtual kind of tours and like the whole virtual world, and that it's in a way very good because it gives it's cheaper and gives other people opportunities to join, and it's still possible with COVID and all kind of other situations. But on the other hand, it loses the contact, which is very important, like the one-on-one. So yeah, that's kind of what we talked about.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts. I think that adds up to what we've learned already from all the speakers. We unfortunately don't have time for questions. There's only 2 minutes left. But maybe I'd like to ask if you have any questions and want for me to direct it to one of the speakers, that can be possible. I can leave my email address and I'll put that here. Oh, Todd, you have your hands.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just in the last 30 seconds, one thing I'd like to share in the chat box is we've also worked with professional videographers to conduct a few different micro documentary films that are between 15 and 25 minutes long that present multiple local perspectives on transboundary conservation in 3 different regions. So we have the Central Albertine Rift Valley, we have Waterton Glacier International Peace Park and the Transboundary Blackfoot Confederacy. And then we have Parque Internacional La Amistad, Costa Rica, Panama, and the indigenous communities there. And so that's one other way that we've thought to try and create a teaching tool that can be a different alternative method of sharing multiple stakeholder perspectives from environmental peace building regions.
Thank you very much, Todd. It's been very full of events of sharing knowledge, and I want to thank you everyone for participating, but also to our speakers. Can't do that very much online, but that is an initial discussion on education and environmental peace building towards the next event that will be next week on Wednesday. So if you want to sign up, don't forget to register. And it's also part of the Road to Geneva events. So there will be a conference in Geneva next year. And Ken has shared a link at the beginning of the session, so you can have a look at this big event that will come up next year. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And if you need anything else, any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. I shared it in the chat. And I'd like to wish you a good evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world, and hope you had a good event.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.